Good morning, everybody, and it's another wonderful Wednesday morning, and we are in conversation with Stephen from the Nancy Oldfield Trust, who is my guest here today. Last week, so the In Conversation series is something that I've started as one of the Norwich Guide Dog Forum coordinators, just to bring the world of being a guide dog owner or being part of the guide dog family closer to the wider world, because I think that until we all come together and all start seeing things from a similar perspective, then the able-bodied world and the visually impaired world, we all need to come together in some shape or form, because I think that middle ground is where we meet best. And in the first week, we were celebrating National Volunteer Week, and I had on the call, I had Sarah and Mark Watson, who are the puppy walkers who raised my guide dog Zorin. And last week, we had Fiona Clark, who is the Zenergizer, who talked us through a couple of tips and techniques on how to manage anxiety. And today is a completely different topic, because that takes us to the Broads and the Nancy Oldfield Trust, which are all about accessible boating for and just access to the water for disabled people and visually impaired people as well. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen to introduce what the Trust does and just generally just how amazing you are, what you do and where you are really. So yeah, over to you. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Lana. Well, I'm the centre manager at the Nancy Oldfield Trust, and we're a small local charity based in Neatishead. So we're about 4 miles northeast, I suppose, of Wroxham on the Broads, and we're based very close to Barton Broad, which is the second largest of all the Norfolk Broads, where a lot of our activities take place. We were founded by a PE teacher, actually, in 1984, called Richard Kenyon, and he worked in London with a lot of disadvantaged kids, and his passion was outdoor activity, and he gave up teaching and came up to Norfolk and set up, in memory of his mother and father, whose names were Nancy and Oldfield Kenyon, hence the name, set up the trust. And it started in a very small way with a few canoes. And then as the years went by, the popularity increased. Richard sort of gained a few more boats, and also adults coming along, because his initial vision was for children, and it broadened and became a charity really aimed at disadvantaged and disabled people. And so our remit is now today very, very broad. And we help people from all walks of life, all over the country, to come on day visits, to come to stay in our self-catering bungalow. And really, we listen to what people want to do and try and facilitate what they'd like to do. And then in terms of the activities that we offer, we are a Royal Yachting Association recognised training centre. So we do a lot of sailing in keel boats, so boats that won't tip over. We've got 10 yachts, which we mostly sail on the Broad, but we do some river sailing as well. And of those 10 yachts, there are 5 different types of boats. So depending on whether people need physical accessibility, or whether they want to come as a group, or whether they want to come as individuals, we've got a boat that will meet the particular needs and aspirations of the person coming. We also have 3 motor cruisers. Now they look like standard cruisers that someone might have a holiday on the Broads on, but ours are rather special in that they're open plan inside, and on the back of the boats they've got hydraulic lifts which come up to river level. So anybody that has difficulty walking or uses a wheelchair can access the boats. And then the final activity that we offer boating activity is rafted canoeing and a little bit of single canoeing. And our rafted canoes will take up to 6 people, and they're brilliant for a bit of team building, particularly when we have children coming along. We have some of the special schools that use us. It's great splitting the girls from the boys, and then seeing the girls organise themselves in next to no time, taking off down the river while the boys are still arguing about who's going to control the boat. But they're very, very popular. And then stop me if you want to jump in, Lana. But
No.
We've had a long-standing relationship with Vision Norfolk, or Norfolk and Norwich Association for the Blind, who have been coming regularly to the Nancy Oldfield Trust to sail, usually every fortnight on a Thursday afternoon for, well, it must be 25, 26 years at least now, so almost since the trust was founded. And what happens with a typical visit, they will arrive at the centre. Some will come independently, some will come in the minibus, and then we'll all get into life jackets at the centre, walk down to the bottom of the garden at our centre, and then get onto boats which we will use to ferry out to the Broad. So we go along Limekiln Dyke, and it's about a 10 to 15 minute ride out to the Broad, where we have our floating base, which we call the Ark, which is a pontoon with facilities on board. So it's got a flashing toilet, it's got electricity, a little galley so you can make cups of tea, a veranda for sitting and watching the sailing if you don't want to sail. And that's where we keep our yachts, and we usually base the sailing sessions from the Ark. So we're very well used to helping people with visual impairment out onto the Broads. We're very friendly, very laid back, and we essentially try and listen very hard to what people want to do or any concerns they might have, allay any fears they might have, and help them have a great time.
So these Thursday afternoon sessions, is this something that people book through the NNAB, or
That's right.
How do they get access to them? Because obviously, because as with everything, when you're visually impaired, transport and getting places is a problem. It just is, because when you can't drive, and especially on the Broads, this is rural, there are actually very few places where you can access the Broads anyway, but particularly if you're disabled or visually impaired, then that transport side of things becomes, complicates things even further. So how does that happen?
Well, yes, with Vision Norfolk, they have a block booking in effect with us. So anybody that wanted to come with that particular group, get in touch with Vision Norfolk, and I'm sure they will be able to say what the arrangements are that they make. But if you wanted to come separately from that group, that's perfectly possible. There are taxi firms, for instance, who can assist with the transport to the trust. We are a little bit in the back of the beyond. Unfortunately, there's no bus service to the village. So the nearest you could get by public transport would be train or bus to Wroxham, but then perhaps a taxi from there. And we also, I should mention, we run a bursary scheme. So for anyone that might have difficulty with covering the cost of the transport to get to us, we can help with that. Typically, we might offer 25% support, but it can be as much as 100% in certain circumstances. And it's not means tested or anything. It works entirely on honesty, but it's there to help anyone that would struggle to get to us otherwise. But if you were wanting to come separately from an organised group that is in existence, like Vision Norfolk, give us a ring and we can see if we can fit you in.
I mean, because to my in a parallel life where I exist somewhere else, I'm also a member of the Broads Authority Board, and my actual physical access to the water is negligible because of my disability. It's really actually difficult getting to places, even any of the boat clubs. For example, what did I want to do? I wanted to do some rowing. I've got a nerg, and I thought, there must be some, with the cocks, does it really matter if I can't see? There must be a way.
Certainly shouldn't. Yeah, absolutely.
And Yes, it's actually it is physically possible to get to the rowing club, but it
Mm,
takes a pretty long time. And then, what do I do with my guide dog when I'm there? It's just it becomes so complicated. So it's good to have
yes.
people like you around, where so much of that practical complication is removed, and it's almost, where things are made easier for you, and
Mm,
it's not, oh, what are you going to do with that then? Looking at your dog,
mm.
or oh, well, we're not entirely sure, and it, it, yeah. So it's just nice to have somewhere where, like you, where all these things are just made so much easier. So yeah. So
Well,
what do you? I mean, just on your Thursdays, is that
yes.
just watching the sailing, or do people actually take part? Because it seems like a
Oh no.
terribly
Yeah.
long time, really.
No, well, I mean, if you wanted to come and just watch rather than be an active participant, that's perfectly fine. Perhaps if I explain a little bit about the dynamics of the groups that we've had in recent years, we have
Yes.
some people who come who it's as much a social occasion out in the open air, and they
Mm.
might jump into one of our bass boats, which are they're Falmouth bass boats based on a traditional fishing boat design.
Mm-hmm.
They're very big, they're very beamy, very wide, very stable,
Mm-hmm.
and a great place for 4 or 5 people to sit and be sailed if they don't want to sail themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and just sail around the Broad and Natter. A very important part of the Vision Norfolk trips in the past has been the tea break. And you see these Tupperware boxes all appearing when we get back to the Ark with these straws and cake and all sorts. So that's a very important part of what the guys want to do when they come to us. And then
Mm.
there are others who they arrive and they just want to get into one of the quicker boats
Mm.
and get off sailing themselves, and they'll be bombing around, might not even come back for the cheese straws and the cake, So we cater for every every requirement, really.
Right.
There's no pressure from us to
Mm-hmm.
do anything that you don't want to do, although
Okay.
we try and encourage people to have a go.
Mm.
Because obviously going on a boat that tips, as sailing boats do naturally, for some people who've never sailed, can be quite an unsettling experience. So we always start very gently and err on the side of caution, because we don't want to put anyone off from the experience of being on the water, which is absolutely fantastic.
Mm.
And we have people who have learning difficulties, all sorts of challenges in their lives,
Mm.
and just being on the water is a very calming place to be.
Mm.
Usually, I have to say, it can be.
I don't know. It's
Obviously, if it's very windy, it can be quite an exciting place to be. But it's very different from most people's experience in their everyday lives.
well, I mean, my experience of boating was in the Adriatic, and it just got too complicated because they have underwater rocks, and it's
Oh
just
gosh.
it's just only so much damage you can do to a boat before it stops floating. So
I suppose so. Well, one of the nice things about the Broads is they're soft and peaty, so
well, yes, exactly.
fewer hard things to run into. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, Gabion baskets accepted, but yes, on the
Yeah,
whole,
well,
yes. Yes, yeah, there's only so much. So, okay, so if somebody completely, watching this was say, oh gosh, I really, really, really fancy a day out on the
mm.
water. So what are the practicalities around lockdown for you these days? How's that? Where are
Right.
you?
Well, yes. Well, where we are is we're planning hard to return to some level of activity, like most people on the Broads, in the Broad sort of hire industry.
Mm.
We're not quite sure what that activity is going to be, so we're in the process of contacting our existing visitors
Mm-hmm.
to find out what their feelings are, what their needs will be coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously a lot of people are going to be really quite nervous about coming out of lockdown after so long inside with all the unknowns.
Mm.
So we'll be putting in place all the sort of measures that we're starting to see is sort of in shops and so on, in terms of distancing, the hygiene, disinfection protocols and regimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the moment, most of my colleagues are on furlough, but in next month, July, we're going to start to bring people back just part-time, to be putting in place through July the measures that we need to have in place and contacting people. We might manage a very limited return with 1 or 2 individuals during July, but we're really planning for August to be able to reopen properly. And the other community, if you like, that are very important to us is our big community of volunteers. We have 8 staff, 4 of whom are operational on the sailing and boating side, but we rely on 85 volunteers, mostly older volunteers and retired people, who without them we wouldn't be able to offer the activities we do. And obviously we have to think about how we're going to bring them back safely into the environment within which we work. And the good thing about the outside environment, of course, is that there's a much lower risk of transmission. I mean, that seems to be agreed, that if you're out in the fresh air, it's a lower risk environment. But the challenges that we particularly face are such things as, well, we often need to physically help people on and off boats, even if it's just holding a hand. So the close proximity is going to be something of a challenge for us. So initially, I think we'll be looking to facilitate people who are able to get themselves on and off boats, for instance. And certainly if we have any sailing, for instance, during July, it will be probably existing visitors who are able to go unaccompanied in boats, because again, the physical distancing on our boats, even though they're 20-foot keel boats, we can't manage a 2-meter distancing at the moment. So it's like most people, we're just wondering exactly how things are going to pan out and react accordingly, really. But it's challenging. But we're in as a charity, we're in a strong position, and my colleagues we're all raring to go to get moving on helping people back in a small way, and hopefully that will build as conditions improve nationally.
Yes, well, I suspect you'll be sort of taking people on who are in the same social bubble, I presume, onto the boats if you're going to have multiple.
Yes. I mean, with one of the things we're going to do with our largest motor cruiser is to enable it to be to have a physical barrier, rather like an old London bus, so that the drivers will be separated within the cabin with a see-through screen, so that family bubbles, for instance, or social bubbles would be able to come as groups. And that won't happen until August, because we've got to actually physically create the conditions within the cabin. It's going to be interesting and challenging, but we're certainly all up for it. And the feedback actually that we've been getting via little surveys and telephone calls that I've been making is really positive, and people are so keen. They're really wanting to come back, but obviously when it's safe to do so.
Yes, definitely. So, and this is just Barton, is it? Because I know that you there's Wroxham, right?
Yeah, we had through the winter we had a trial with one of our boats based in Wroxham, because I've been keen for a long while to enable people who can only access the Broads via public transport. Yeah, exactly. Your point earlier. That worked very well. We currently don't have a boat at Wroxham, but we're in discussion with the Broads Authority about the possibility of renewing that experiment at a later date. And there are some other options that I've got to chase up on, which were put on hold when the lockdown occurred. But Wroxham is an obvious place for us to have a boat because of the accessibility.
Well, it is. I mean, it's so easy. It's the Pink Line out of Norwich, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And then and that bus goes every 10-15 minutes when in the daytime. So, and it goes on quite late at night. So it's perfect in so many ways, really, to have, to be at Wroxham. Is that just for day trips, or?
Yes, that was what we did, and what we've done in the past. We had a motor cruiser near the Broads Authority Information Centre on Station Road.
Oh, okay.
And so it was motorboat trips from from Houghton, really, up the River Bure as far as Coltishall.
Mm-hmm.
So really quiet and beautiful, quite wooded
Yes,
part of the Broads.
I
A
know.
lovely spot to travel
I
on.
know. Yes,
But that's
yes.
not operational at the moment, and our motorboats will be operating. All our boats will be operating from the centre.
From Barton, if you do open in
From the
August. So,
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
yes. Okay, so from Barton. So, for example, so this year you're going to be, so there'll be sort of, there'll be the cruiser, there'll
Yeah.
be sailing, hopefully.
Hopefully.
What if somebody, not thinking of anybody in particular, wanted to get back into sailing? How does that happen when you're visually impaired and trying to get into doing some physical activity? Because I don't think it's disputed by anybody anymore that physical activity and being out in nature is incredibly important for not just physical health but mental well-being. And we find ourselves in times that challenge us as individuals and society in so many ways. There's family breakdowns. People are reacting to in ways that they probably wouldn't normally, because everybody's afraid, anxious, uncertain. And I think that what you offer on the water, in the setting that you have, is pretty much the perfect antidote to what is going on in the world right now. So yeah, so putting you on the spot, Steve.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Was how people said, yeah, tell you what, coming out of lockdown, I'd like to learn a new skill or do something new or try something new. What can you offer in the supporting environment that you have that's suitable for visually impaired people to literally get your hands on? Because there's just so much stuff that you can't really do necessarily. I mean, I'd like to see the look on people's faces if I rocked up for a hire boat just up one of the normal places and explained. I don't think I'd be allowed one.
Sure. So in terms of physically what happens, so if we leave aside the sort of the restrictions we have at the present with coronavirus, so someone that wants to sail that has a visual impairment would, under normal circumstances, go in a boat with one of our instructors, might be one of the staff or a volunteer instructor. And to be quite honest, when I've sailed with some of our visitors from NNAB, I'm just the lookout, because they're such good sailors. So many of our visitors, that I'm just keeping an eye open for things that they can't see. There's a post coming up, or just bear away from the wind a little, or head up into the wind a little in order to avoid something. But so that's the ideal. So essentially, I'm just a passenger, keeping an eye open for anything that might cause a navigational problem for whoever's skippering the boat. So that's someone who's become competent or was a competent sailor, but they just get on with it. And I'm most of the time just chatting about this and that, but keeping a watch. For someone that's absolutely new to sailing, then it would probably need a little bit more hands-on. The first thing I do with someone new in a boat is finding out how they would like to communicate, where I need to communicate to. Do I need to turn my head to face them, how much vision the individual has, and so on. So it's really getting the information from the person that I'm taking out as to what works for them, and also to give them the confidence to say to me, "What, I don't understand what you're saying. Explain it in a different way," or put my hand on something. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's really we have to be, and we are sensitive to how individuals like to learn and what works for them in their own particular circumstances. And I think that's the key, is just communicating, really. The actual physical sort of process of sailing a boat, it's pulling on a rope, it's pushing on a tiller to steer the boat. It can be as physically demanding or as undemanding as you like, because you've got your instructor or your crew to help. if that's required.
Mm.
Uh, so some of the other, I'm just thinking about different experiences on the boats. We have a boat called a venture keel,
Mm-hmm.
which is specifically designed for people who have mobility problems,
Mm-hmm.
who can't move about a boat. And unusually in a sailing boat, you both sit side by side, which obviously physically distancing wouldn't allow at the moment, but you sit side by side in bucket seats in the bottom of the boat, facing forwards, and you each have a joystick between your knees, rather like flying a glider. In fact, it's the controls are almost identical to flying a glider.
That could be fun.
It's extremely fun. And so as you go along, you tip to one side, and the water's rushing past your elbow. It does mean you don't have to leap around to counterbalance the boat. So that's a brilliant way of someone getting into sailing, because you have someone with a dual control right next to you who can help you out, either provide a little bit more muscle on the controls or take over if you suddenly think, oh, I can't cope,
I'm going too fast. That's usually my problem.
But I think, going back to it, I think the key for us is just listening to what people want to do, finding out what the challenges are that individual faces, or any concerns they might have, and then take it from there. And we don't rush anybody. We want it to be a fun experience. I mean, people often ask me about what's the sort of ethos of the trust, and it's really to be safe and to give people a good time. And it's as simple as that. There's no rocket science, really. And I always think the thing that impressed me, I actually started as a volunteer at the trust about 12 years ago, and the thing that impressed me then, and I hope we've still got this, is that I turned up at the gate, and I'm just another person sort of coming for a day out. And the feeling that we had then was that anybody that comes through the gate is just another human being coming to enjoy themselves on the Broads. And that, for me, is the most important thing. If you like people and you enjoy their company and you enjoy giving them a good experience, then that's all we need to do. And people keep coming back. That's the other thing. So we must be doing something right, I think.
Yeah. So lockdown easing permitting and everything else. Do people need any special equipment or waterproofs or anything if they turn up, or is that something that you cover off?
Yeah, no, we cover that. So all the sort of safety equipment, buoyancy aids or life jackets we provide. We've also got waterproof leggings and coats if people haven't got their own. The only thing we ask people to bring for themselves are sensible footwear for climbing in and out of boats. So trainers are fine, or some people who come regularly, for instance, they get themselves a pair of sailing boots if they're going to be sailing in the wet. That's one thing I should say. We haven't really mentioned how it works with guide dogs.
No, well, we're going to get onto that. I wasn't going to let you answer.
Yeah. Leaping ahead. At the moment, we don't have life jackets in place for dogs, but that's something that we will do. What tends to happen is that individuals who know they're going to be taking their dogs on the water will buy themselves their own personal dog life jacket, or buoyancy aid, I should say. And they, in terms of cost, they're
available from major supermarkets, right? Or is this?
Yeah, well, pretty much. Yeah, yes. I think they cost between about £15 and £35, depending on the size of the dog. But we're going to have some of those in place, borrow. So some owners choose to come without their dogs, if that's possible for them to do, and we have had one or two who have brought their dogs in the past, and of course, like all guide dogs, wonderfully behaved. There was one Labrador who he would just hop on the boats and sailing boat, hide himself underneath the seat in the middle, and would doze off for the entire afternoon, and then sort of come to at the end of it, and off he went. But some dogs don't like being in boats. They usually like water, but the movement in a boat can upset some dogs. So, again, as with the owners, we'd have to play it by ear to see how the dogs react. But there's always the arc, of course, where the dog can be. But again, it's down to how the owner, because we're not experts on how you look after a guide dog, but we're experts in helping people to achieve what they want to achieve with the dog.
Yes, is there I mean, is there an area where they can be left briefly if somebody goes off sailing, or is this does this become problematic? What I'm
Mm,
thinking of, Stephen, is
mm,
a lot of us visually impaired people live on our own,
mm,
so e- even if you set off for a day, or for example, I'm going to go say, the dog has to come because you need to get to you at some point. But then if the activity is then, either sailing or canoeing of some description, then I mean, I've kayaked with my guide dog on it, but he wasn't
mm.
terribly impressed, I have to say.
Right.
He was, yeah, there's me paddling, perched on the kayak, going, why? is this,
What
this
are you
is really
doing? Where's she
unnecessary. This is
taking me?
not in my job description. I would much rather be on dry land watching you, thank you. Is there anywhere for them to sort of stay while you're out on the water, or not terribly?
Well, that's an interesting question. We haven't really had that situation. What has tended to happen is that the owners haven't wanted to be too far separated from their dogs.
Okay.
So I think I'm just trying to recall what we've done in the past. So, for instance, with a canoeing session, we've had the guide dog in one of our safety support boats, which is like a flat bottom
Right, okay.
motorboat, sort of watching the owner in the canoe. So whether that works for the individual dog, I don't know. We
So
don't.
I'm just trying to picture my guide dog. This is just, yes.
Well, tell you what, you could be a guinea pig for us, and we could experiment.
Yeah, in so many ways.
It sounds to me as though there's a bit of a learning curve there for us. Potentially.
I think it's my various guide dogs are possibly the reason why I find doing new activities it's difficult, because
Mm,
I mean, I've got the guide dog that I have now. I got him 2 years ago now in July, and I feel like I'm still getting used to him. But
uh,
it's exposing him to new situations, and I never know what he's going to embrace and where he's going to sort of put the brakes on and go, no, this is not happening, not
yes,
at all. So it would just be nice to sort of have an alternative, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could come up with alternatives. I mean, for instance, going on the cruises is just like jumping in a car on the motor cruises. So I would imagine that would be
Yeah.
a good fallback position to have. And actually, the open motorboats, they're very secure feeling, and they don't rock around. So I would have thought, not a particularly upsetting situation for a dog. But we haven't actually had that much experience of any issues with the guide dogs that we've had coming. They've
Oh
all
no,
been wonderful.
yeah. Well, they are beautifully trained.
Yeah.
I just think that, if I was to sort of do something, it would have to be something doing,
Yeah.
because it's, yeah. I have calluses on my hand. God only
Yes.
knows from what, but I
Yes. Yeah. Right.
always do.
Active. Yeah.
It's just,
Well, certainly
yeah.
the canoes. We don't use kayaks. We use Canadian canoes,
Canoes,
which are
yes.
open, so there's plenty of room for dogs in those. And the rafted ones are
Mm,
catamarans, so
yeah.
you could have your dog in one side and you'd be in the other side.
Mm,
So there's ways around it. I'm sure we
mm,
could do something.
yeah. No, I'm sure. I'm sure. Right. Okay. Well, Stephen, I've taken up enough of your time for this morning, but I do know that you have agreed to come and see us at the August Guide Dog Forum, haven't you? And sort of meet some of our members and answer questions. So I'm really grateful to you for that, because obviously I've got you to myself here today, but it would just be nice to sort of share what you have, because speaking to some of them, I know some of them have been
Yes,
and taken. Yeah, they have been to see you, and they'd probably like to share their experiences with the rest of the group. And it would just be lovely to know, where you're at, because I'm seeing you. It's the first Friday in August, isn't it? So it'd be
that's
nice
right.
to
Yeah.
know if you're up and running. Then, if there's anything we can actually get our
Yeah, sure.
rates
Well,
on or anything, so that would be really good.
hopefully we will know a little bit more by then as the situation develops. But yeah, I'll be delighted to do that. And today hasn't put me off the idea of, of agreeing to it either. So
well, you know, you can't believe everything you hear about me. It's all I can say.
Oh, right. No, I'm not doing it.
No. Right. So, right. On that note, thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you so much for introducing the Nancy Oldfield Trust to us. It's, yeah, so you know, to my shame, I've been member of the authority since 2013, and I haven't come to see you yet, but you've always been in the back of my mind as, yeah, one of the things I really ought to have done. So I think it's just because my family are based more around Whitlingham and the rowing club, really. So the children are younger, but they're trying to leave to go to university if anyone will ever teach them ever again in this lockdown situation. So yes, which should probably free me up to do things that I really want to do, which would be really good. So right. Okay, so thank you, Stephen. What I'll do is I'll introduce what we're doing next week. So today I was in conversation with Stephen, who is the Centre Manager at the Nancy Oldfield Trust in North Norfolk. And next week, in conversation, we're going to be back to our volunteers, and I will be welcoming Dawn Cobb, who is from the northwest of the country and is probably one of the most amazing fundraisers for the charity I've ever had the pleasure to meet. She's an extraordinary lady, and I can't wait to introduce her to you. So for now, thank you, Stephen, again, and thank you from me. And I shall see you again next week with Dawn. Bye.